And so it was prudent for us to preempt that and to attack them first as an act of preemptive self-defense. I'm translating now. This is the essence of what he said in German. Putativ Notstand, if you want to know the exact term, presumed necessity. But why did you kill all the Jews? Well, the Jews were sympathetic to the Bolsheviks. Everybody knows that. The Jews are sympathetic to the Bolsheviks. So we had to kill all the Jews. What about the gypsies? Why did you kill all the gypsies? Well, everybody knows gypsies are not reliable. They could go over and espionage for the enemy and so on. So the only safe thing to do is to kill them all. And the children, why do you kill hundreds of thousands of little children? Well, if they grew up and they knew we'd murdered their parents, or killed their parents, they never used the word murder, and we had eliminated their parents, they too would be enemies of Germany, and we were interested in the long-range security of Germany. And therefore, of course, we had to kill the children. Then he went on to explain, you know, also that where they had the old and infirm, the children couldn't walk and the old couldn't walk, and so they had used gas vans. There was a truck disguised to look like a trailer, house trailer. They jammed the people in, close the doors, lock them in, attach the gas from the motor to the inside of the van, and the idea was 20 minutes later when you arrive at the ditch where you're going to dump them, they'll be dead. But he explained that they didn't work well. Sometimes they broke down, sometimes the hoses weren't working, and sometimes when they get there, some of the people were still alive. Now, of course, they were covered with feces and urine and blood from screaming, trying to get out. And he said, then my men had to unload them by hand. And he said it was very hard on the men. And he said, I didn't want to use those gas vans. So you have the rationale of an educated, high-ranking German official explaining why he did the things I have described to you, not in gruesome terms, but just in general terms, because the gruesome terms are too much for you and too much for me. And the idea of killing 1 million people because it's presumed self-defense, it's an anticipatory action which is necessary to defend the nation, didn't work well for Germany. The judges dealt with that defense in extenso. They said it is no defense because the primary rule of all laws applies equally to everyone. That's what Jackson's been referred to too, is pointing out. If you apply equally to everyone, suppose everyone went around and decided he was going to kill in self-defense any presumed enemy, including the children and the women and the aged, what would our world look like? And that memory stays with me. And I have spent the last 50 years of my life trying to create a more humane world. I said so in the opening statement, which my son Don put on the screen. Because these people were killed because they didn't share the race, the religion, or the ideology of their executioners. And I thought then, and I think now, that it's a terrible thing to think that way and to act consistent with those principles. And so I've been puzzled with the problem, what can you do about it? I have thought deeply on the problem. If you look at my website, which is my name, Ferencz.org, you'll find I've written many books on the subject, dozens of articles, dozens of speeches. And it's not an easy problem. It will take a long time to resolve. But I think it can be done, and before I leave this morning, I will explain the progress to you. But that is the objective, to create a more humane world where everyone can live in peace and human dignity, regardless of his race or creed. And I think that can be done. The question of the Iraq War is something which has been mentioned as I went around here. One gentleman said, please talk about the Iraq War, and then one of the questioners put the question. The Iraq War disturbs me enormously. I'm fairly familiar with the plan someone asked about after, whether it's 40 or 50 million people killed, I don't know. Nobody knows. Henry says 58 or whatever, maybe 68, who knows. The plan was simple in its broad outline. The United Nations would have a charter, and it would enable nations to come together and discuss their differences. The Nuremberg principles, no genocide, no crimes against humanity, no war crimes, would become the legal basis. Committees would be set up to draft a code of crimes against the peace and security of mankind. The United Nations Security Council presumably would have the chief powers there to maintain the peace. That was the basic idea. I might mention en passant that there were many things about the UN Charter which didn't make any sense at all. For example, the veto power. If you have an organization in which those who have the best possibility of disrupting the peace are the ones who have to decide whether the force can be used or not, you're having the foxes guarding the hen house. And the reason that veto power got in there, which makes no sense from any fairness point of view, you start off saying all states are equal, and then 5 are more equal than the others, however, was political, because you couldn't get it through the U.S. Senate without 2/3 ratifying the treaty. That's according to our Constitution. And we had a conservative group in America, which was more than 1/3, it wasn't more than the majority, who said, no, we're not going to submit our troops to any foreign jurisdiction or some new organization like the League of Nations. Oh, no. We want to have veto right. And in order to meet that political objection raised, the veto right was written in. Otherwise, you would not have had any membership of the United States in the United Nations any more than we had membership in the League of Nations for the same reason. Now, America is a great democracy. It's inevitable that in every great democracy you'll have people with a different point of view. Perfectly normal. And I think that's as it should be. But the public has to know the truth. A person cannot expect democracy to work where they're being fed materials as Goebbels did in Germany, where they don't know what the truth is. When we come to the Iraq War, the American Society of International Law, which I am a member, put out a wonderful little brochure, a summary of one of their editions, on the future implications of the Iraq conflict. And in this publication, they stated very fairly the point of view of different people in the administration and abroad as to the legality of the Iraq War. And there are competent lawyers, and they're listed there, and most of them I know personally, who say, well, the world has changed. You have nuclear weapons now. The United Nations doesn't really work because the Security Council is so politicized that they vote only their national interest. So that doesn't work. And you have terrorism. And these are new factors. And just as my late, I won't call him my friend, my late defendant, Ollendorf said, this is total war. The Soviet Union is engaging in total war. No rules count. We can do whatever we want. We have to protect the nation is the only rule. So we have the argument being made, the United States is under attack, threatened by nuclear weapons, threatened by terrorism. We cannot rely on the provisions of the Charter which we drafted and which we insisted upon and which we accepted and which are binding law in the United States in accordance with the United States Constitution, that you cannot use armed force without approval by the Security Council.